So, all right, so why don't we get started? My name is Candace, and I run Success in Education here at CauseVox, and I'm here joined by Kelly McLaughlin, who is your nonprofit coach, and she has been working with nonprofits over the last 10 years, specifically growing individual giving. So it's been amazing to see what she's been able to accomplish with growing these individual giving programs that raised over $1 million annually after 4 years from the ground up. So she is bringing a real wealth of knowledge that she herself has learned from being in your shoes. And I'm really excited for the course today. So just so you know, there's going to be a lot of resources and templates that we're going to be distributing. Kelly will get into all of that, and I'll be chatting out those links as much as possible, and then also including those in the follow-up email tomorrow. If you have any questions, please feel free. We actually are going to do 2 Q&A sessions because we know as an intensive class, it's a lot to take in. So we're going to break for about 10-15 minutes in the middle to answer your questions halfway through, and then do another Q&A session at the end. So feel free to chat all of your questions in as we go through the course today. So I think that's it. So Kelly, I'm just so excited to hear all about getting started with individual giving.
Awesome. All right. Well, hi, everybody. Just a little bit about me. I've been in the nonprofit industry for over a decade, and I've worked with both small and medium-sized nonprofits. And beyond those, I've worked for as a staff member. I've also served on the board of a number of organizations. I've consulted with a number of organizations. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly out there. But I've helped to build a number of individual giving operations from the ground up, as Candace mentioned. And so I've been around this block a few times, and I know how intimidating it can feel, but it really doesn't have to be. So my goal through all of this is I really want you to walk away from this feeling more empowered. I also want to acknowledge that so many organizations and so many individuals are struggling right now with the pandemic and everything that's going on in our world and in our communities. So I just want you to know that, like, if you've got kids on school Zooms and all kinds of stuff like that, as Candace said, this is being recorded, so you can come back to this whenever. And then the last thing is, this is going to be a lot of information, and I have done presentations like this, and some of the responses I get are like, oh, there's so much I'm not doing, oh, I'm so frustrated. So I just also want to add a note of, you know, please try and release that. This is about moving forward and learning and growing. So I want to make sure that you leave this feeling not frustrated with what you haven't done, but empowered and optimistic about what you can do, because I'm here for you. The CauseVox team is here for you. And I have every confidence that you can do it. So, so with that, I want to just go ahead and get started. So what's included in this, since you paid for access to this webinar, it's this webinar. You get on-demand access to it to watch anytime after this, and the slides as a PDF. And then you also get a CauseVox basic plan to run your digital fundraising for free. And it also includes a free 30-minute digital fundraising consultation with CauseVox on their platform. And I'll give you details at the end, but a free 60-minute coaching session with me. So if there's any part of this webinar that you really want to dig into or discuss about how it applies to your specific organization, you'll have an opportunity to do that. And I'll give you the details on how to sign up for that at the end. So I want to start with the donor pipeline. This is the basis for everything that we're going to build upon through the rest of the session. So when you get down to brass tacks, like a well-structured, well-implemented donor pipeline is the foundation of everything you're going to do in an individual giving program. So when you think about things like peer-to-peer or email appeals or telethons, or those are all tools to create a high-functioning donor pipeline. Those are not pipelines or programs unto themselves. They're tools. They're also not silver bullets that are going to create a program for you. So there's a pipeline that you have to build around, and your campaigns and all these tools play into building that pipeline. So you want to think about this pipeline as a general pipeline that you're going to take all of your donors through, but you also want to think through specific pipelines based on entry points and the different asks you're planning to make. And I'll talk about that a little bit. So your pipeline starts with donor identification, and that's qualifying potential donors or finding people who opt in to support your organization. And then there's the nurture, cultivate stage. You hear different terms used, but nurture and cultivate. And that's really based on storytelling. And the goal here is slowly building affinity between your organization and potential donors. Then the convert or solicit phase in your pipeline is when you make that ask. I'm sure you've heard that term before if you've been in fundraising at all, but basically asking for a donation. And then stewardship happens after a donor makes a gift. So it's about reporting back to that donor and sharing the impact of their gift. And then there's the upgrade stage. So that's where you get your donor more engaged through repeat, monthly, major, or legacy giving. So that's kind of the general pipeline that I want you to keep in mind. I also like to, I just find this a helpful rule of thumb. I like to compare the donor pipeline a little bit to dating. So bear with me while I walk you through this. The identification and attraction is kind of like going out into the world and seeing who's out there. So I think of identification like a speed dating session. You're going to meet a bunch of people and you're going to see if they jive with you. And maybe a few of them you're interested in getting to know a little better. Then nurture and cultivate is kind of the dating part of the analogy. So that's when you start to get to know somebody, you're getting to know what they care about, you're getting to know their backstory, you're telling them a little bit about you and what you're interested in. And a lot of nonprofits like to ask people for a donation the minute somebody signs up for email or hits their websites. And so I want you to keep in mind this dating analogy. That's like asking somebody to marry you on the first date. And if we say that marriage, proposing marriage is where you do the convert or solicit. So you really, really do want to do some cultivating and nurturing before you ask for a gift. And then in this analogy, stewardship is the work you do on the marriage after you've said yes. So marriage isn't the end of a relationship, it's the beginning of a new, significantly more committed relationship. So a donation isn't the end of your relationship with a donor, even though we're kind of driving towards that ask. There's a reason it's in the very middle of the pipeline. A donation isn't the end of your relationship with the donor, it's the beginning of a new, more engaged relationship. And I really apologize, this is where the analogy falls apart. I don't have an analogy for an upgrade. I was working on one where maybe the upgrades is when you decide to have kids, but it falls apart really fast as soon as you think about it. So anyways, upgrades are upgrades. So anyway, how do you start your pipeline? If you have no names, you're going to start with the identification phase. So that simply means you're going to go fishing out in the wide world and see who raises their hand and says that they care about your mission. And where you start will always depend on where you've been, but you always need to be tending your whole pipeline. So you need to build it mindfully. That's something that I think we rush to the gifts and then we fall down on the stewardship, or we're so busy getting first gifts from donors, we don't think about how we're going to get a second gift from those donors. So you really need to mindfully build a pipeline that you can manage all the pieces of and all the stages of at the same time. All right. So unless you have 100% donor retention, and I've yet to meet an organization that has 100% donor retention, even when you have a well-running, robust program, you're going to still be losing donors. So you always have this dual goal of identifying new donors and then retaining and reactivating the donors that you have. So for example, I worked with a think tank for a while that had 80% donor retention, which is insanely high retention for the nonprofit industry. But they were still losing 20% of their donors every year. And so we put together a really concrete plan to continue to plug that gap. And we plugged that gap about 10% per year by upgrading the current donors. But then we also did have to find enough donors to make up that other 10%. So my point here is, even if your donor retention is astronomically high, you still have to tend the whole pipeline. There's no point when you don't have to worry about finding new donors. There's no point where you don't have to worry about keeping the donors you have. So let's talk about what makes a good donor to start out. These are my prospective donor ABCs. So the A is access. If you can reach this person, then you have access. The main reason I mention access, because it feels like a no-brainer, but the reason I ask it is so that when you're talking to your community, to your boards, that you remind them that access is essential, because the number of people who have mentioned to me just to throw Oprah Winfrey, for example. You probably don't have access to Oprah Winfrey, and I don't either. Most of your board members probably don't. So I do like to mention access, because I think as fundraisers, we know access is important. But make sure, if you're talking to other people, as you're talking about who could be in your prospective donor pool, that access is something that comes up. You don't really want to go after donors who nobody in your organization knows. B is belief. Belief is kind of the second hurdle in finding prospective donors. Belief is about whether or not they care about your mission. Do they have a passion for the work that they do? This is an obstacle, because when you're just out in the wide world, not everybody is gonna have a burning fire for your mission. And that's okay. You don't have to be everyone's cup of tea. But that's why when you think about things like event tickets and raffles and auctions, those often don't yield the best donors, because those are folks who are getting something in return for the money they're giving you. So that is a transaction. That's more like a store. But if you're looking for donors who will give ask after ask, you really want people who believe in what you do. And then the last thing on the ABCs is capacity. And capacity varies based on what you are looking for. If you're looking for lots of donors who can make small gifts, the capacity hurdle is much lower. If you're trying to focus on major gift acquisition, then capacity is a bit more of a challenge. You're looking for people who have a more demonstrated ability to give. So that question plays into how you plan and build your pipeline. If you only want major gifts, you're going to design your pipeline differently than if you can do small gifts, or if you're going to focus on peer-to-peer as a tactic to acquire new donors, rather than like high-level cultivation involving your board. So capacity is something that's going to influence how you raise money. Okay, so identification. You want to start with A and B. So you want to start by identifying who you want to actively attract and cultivate. If you're starting with 0 donors, this is obviously your very first step. And you'll want to do a few rounds of very personalized touches with friends and networks of your board, your staff, your volunteers, to establish kind of a base. So you want to start with people who are already in your community or on an email list. If you don't even have that, talking to your staff members or board or volunteers to have them reach out to their networks, their friends and families who might be interested in supporting your cause. There's also potential donors can come from clients, patrons, or beneficiaries of your services. So if you're a performing arts group, for example, people who buy tickets to your productions can also be your ideal potential donors, right? There's also, I know, some programs that have worked on homelessness or unemployment work. And once they have clients that have been out of their program for a few years, who are back on their feet and everything, those are people that they talk to about donating to, kind of as a pay it forward kind of thing, that have had really great success in building donor communities through former clients, which I think is really powerful in a lot of ways. So one thing, if you're really starting from 0, bring a list of names to your staff and board and see who each person can reach out to and solicit, and building your program at the very, very beginning through individual relationships, one-on-one relationships, and cultivation can be a really nice way to build that base up. And the nice thing about all of these people that I've listed is likely those folks you're going to have access and belief. So it's really about vetting the capacity. Do they have the capacity to give at the level that you need them to give at? And the nice thing is, if you're going for smaller gifts, then that C obstacle is very, very low. So then we move on to donor attraction. So that's using my dating analogy, that's when you say, do you want to go out with me? Do you want to learn more about me? Should we get to know each other? And them saying yes to that request is about giving you their email. That's what I like to focus on the front end of donor attraction. So why would I give you my email? Here are some reasons. So you can tell a really, really good story about your work. You can provide information that they want or need in the form of reports or downloads or freebies, giveaways, that kind of thing. Petitions are a really handy way to get emails for especially advocacy organizations. And you can also do pledges, which is kind of a subset of petitions. And then of course, you want people to sign up because they want to hear about your services. Again, if you're a performing arts organization, getting their emails to come to your performances. People who want to see your performances are people who are likely to be good donors. If you run summer camp programs, having them give you their email to know when camp sign up and registration starts, those kinds of things. So I've got some examples later on of each of these types of attraction methods. And then there are different channels on which you can attract these donors to you. So I try to build my pipeline on this side to drive to emails. I find emails, we call that a captured audience, right? So you're not having to continue going out into the world to talk to them. You have their email and you can contact them yourself. So you can initiate contact. Otherwise, it's about them initiating contact. And so that's website, social media, offline channels. I think in a increasingly digital world, and especially right now with COVID, we're not thinking about offline channels, but there are some really great offline channels that can help you with this donor attraction, like purchase mailing lists, door hangers, tabling opportunities, and business partnerships. So those are all things I'm going to talk about later on. So this is an example of a homepage that's very obviously upfront asking for your email. This is the homepage of Grassroots Law Project. They represent the families of Black men and women who have been killed by police or have been wrongly incarcerated. And I follow their work because I believe in their mission, but also I think they are so smart about their approach to marketing and attracting donors and supporters. So what I love about this is they've got photos of the individuals they're representing. It's particularly powerful because they represent a number of people with very high profile cases. Then they've got 3 words to describe their organization: fierce, smart, organized. Those are great words that tell you about the vibe. And I will tell you, when you sign up for their emails, you get lots of things that reflect this fierce, smart, organized theme. And then they have just one statement, what they do. And then what I love most is this call to action that they have, and we want you on our team. And I love that because, again, they do a great job in the emails they send out of making you, once you sign up for their emails, feel like you are a part of the group, that you're part of what they're doing. And so I like that as an invitation. And then obviously they're asking for your name and email there so that you can connect with the work they do. Similarly, this is Kind Kids in Need of Defense. And this is an example of a petition. So petitions are a little tricky. They're great for advocacy groups because you can send out petitions, you can ask people to sign petitions, and you can really learn a lot about what people care about through petitions. So they're a great way to capture emails and learn about your audience. But I will say, do not use petitions just to get email addresses. They're significantly less powerful if they aren't relevant. But if they can serve a mission-specific goal, they can be very helpful in helping you understand your audience. And then Kind, this is their homepage. So the petitions and the letters they're asking people to sign. And then if you go on their social channels, they have similar branding that has those requests for signups to their petitions. Much less asks to donate, much more petitions. So once you're on their email list, then they'll start to send you the fundraising requests. And then similar to petitions, but maybe more relevant to non-advocacy organizations, are pledges. So this is an organization called Wait Until 8th, and they are all about trying to get parents to sign this pledge that says that you're not going to give your child a smartphone until they're in 8th grade. And a pledge is another way to capture emails and figure out information about your audience. So for example, this organization, if you take their pledge, they ask you the age and grade of your child. And that's a smart move, both, you know, for on the delivering me information that's relevant to me, but also for them to learn. They when I sign up and I say I'm the parent of a kindergartner, they are not going to send me information that's relevant to the parents of teenagers, right? They can send me information that's relevant to me in my life, because what am I going to do if they send me, the mother of a kindergartner, emails meant for parents of teens? I'm going to unsubscribe because it's not relevant to me. So that's deliberate, and it's very good marketing. Similarly, their social media, often their social media has tips like this. So are you struggling with how much you're on your own smartphone? Here is a way that you can break your own kind of dependency on your smartphone. So it's what I like about this is it gives me something that's relevant to why I would be interested in this organization. I'm a parent that doesn't want to be on my smartphone all the time in front of my kids. So they're giving me a way to be less attracted to my smartphone. And then they say, oh, and if you want more, visit us at our homepage, and boom, this is what you hit on their homepage. This is their entire homepage. So that's a really great way to drive to emails. So then attraction, some offline methods that we use a little less often now, but are still kind of powerful, will hopefully be powerful again on the other side of this pandemic. Purchased list appeals. This is when you go to a mail house or you go to another organization and ask for their list. Sometimes this can be achieved by going to a partnering organization and seeing if you could do a joint marketing thing where you could each notify your followers of the other's organization. I've done things like that with organizations that organizations I've worked with have partnered with. So that's one thing you can do. Purchasing a list can be a little expensive and low yield because you don't 100% know the affinity, but I'm putting it out there as an option because it's something that a number of nonprofits do. Tabling opportunities, I've seen quite a few organizations do really well with this, particularly in the performing arts industry. It's kind of a slow roll, but it can be very impactful. So this is where at community festivals or things like that, which are all on pause right now, but when they get going again, it's going, you set up a table, you got information out there, and the best part is your staff or your volunteers are there and they're doing face-to-face interactions. And one organization I worked with, we set up each tabling event that we did, when we would import the names and emails of everybody who signed up for our list, we would send an email from the volunteer or the staff member that was at that tabling thing. And the welcome email, instead of getting our standard welcome email, was a welcome email that said, hey, this is Kelly. I met you at this festival. It was so nice to talk to you. Thanks for signing up. I can't wait to do more with you. And so that was a really effective way that we got people more engaged with that nonprofit. Then business partnerships are one that can be really creative and helpful. This is an example from Chesapeake Climate Action Network. It's an organization I've worked with, and their business partner is a group called Neighborhood Sun. So Chesapeake Climate Action Network is a local advocacy group working on policies to mitigate climate change in the Chesapeake region. And Neighborhood Sun is a community solar business that was just getting up and running. And so the two organizations worked together to create a business partnership. For anyone who signed up through CCAN's unique URL on Neighborhood Sun's website to get Neighborhood Sun's emails, they would share the email address with the organization along with all the information that they had gathered, and then gave gave CCAN a donation on top of it. So it was a great way for CCAN put that marketing out on websites, social, print media when we were doing in-person events with that unique URL. And then we both got those signups. So it was a powerful partnership that way. And then the for-profit company gave donations for every email sign up to the nonprofit. So it benefited the nonprofit in a number of ways. So that's something, thinking a little bit outside the box on donor acquisition, that's one option that you can think about how that might work for your organization. And then also door hangers, if you're a smaller, kind of more community-based organization, this might work well. This is an example from the Old Greenbelt Theater, which is an organization I work with. You can actually see the marquee of the cinema behind in this photo. And they took a remittance envelope in door hanger bags and hung them on the doors of the surrounding community the week after Thanksgiving. And the remittance envelope on the inside flap had a very short case for support and asked donors if they could just give us their email or could they include a small donation. And just putting that on about, I think we put it on 2,000 doors, we raised $7,000 that way. And I'll note that they very wisely posted this on their social media right beforehand and said, hey, if you live in this neighborhood, you're gonna get this on your door, you know, check your doorknob and donate. So do note that they checked with their city government and did all the requisite paperwork and paid the fees to be able to do that. Some jurisdictions won't let you do stuff like that. But again, this is just an example of when you think outside the box, how can you reach and connect with new donors? So the next stage in attraction is the welcome email. They've signed up, they've given you their email. Make sure that there's a way when they sign up to generate a welcome email that's worth reading. So as much as possible, try to tag folks based on where you got their email. So whether if it was an event or if it was you know, through social media, or if they signed a pledge or anything like that. So you want to customize the welcome email as much as possible. So that also means you want to drive people to a sign up that will allow you to tag them in whatever database you're using. Any autoresponder or welcome series should reflect that how they came to you. Having a clear, compelling subject line that is not welcome or thanks for signing up, those get deleted. One that I loved was, you just made my day. So something like that. I'm gonna open you just made my day because I wanna find out how I did that. But if somebody says, thanks for signing up, I often delete it without reading it. And then you've just lost an opportunity to get my attention. I like to start these with gratitude. Thank you so much. We're building a community of people who care about whatever issue, and you're part of it now, and that means so much to us. You want to reinforce that they made a good decision to sign up to your email. So sometimes that means, for some organizations, we say, we will not email you more than once a week. We will not sell or share your contact information. That kind of thing can be helpful to underscore in a welcome email. And then remember, this is your first storytelling opportunity. So you want to make sure that they get the vibe of your organization and that they understand a little bit more about your mission. A welcome email could be a way to tell your founding story or a way to tell a recent success and how you got there. And then the most important thing is tell them what to do next. So a welcome email, you said, hey, can I have your email? And they said, yes. So now what do you want them to do next? It could be a donation. You might get people to unsubscribe that way, but something like, hey, I got your email. Now could you share our information on social, something like that, that's giving them another interaction point, another thing they can do for your organization. So that's a really helpful kind of thing to do is make sure that you've got a welcome email, or some people do a welcome series, which is a series of 2 or 3 emails to build a narrative that, that welcomes that person into your community. So then can I just ask for a gift? Can I get people to sign up? You know, if I put something on social, can I say just donate? To that I say, would you ask someone to marry you on the first date? Probably not. So technically, yes, you can ask for a gift as a way to get people's contact information, get them to opt in. But I think you're going to see some lowered conversion rates that way. If you're just asking for an email, I mean, if you think about it and what people ask of you, if somebody's just asking, hey, can I have your email so we can stay in touch? That's easy. That's easy to say, oh yeah, sure. Like all you're asking for is a little bandwidth in my inbox. If somebody says, hey, can I have money before I even talk to you? You're less likely to say yes, I'm guessing. So I think too often we think about what we want other people to do for us and not how we want to be treated as donors ourselves. So think about that a little bit as you're building this process, and would you be off put by an ask at the stage that you are asking a donor for money at? That was a complicated sentence. But yeah, so think about it that way. There's some reflection that you want to do there, because gifts like that, they're likely to be smaller. Those donors are likely to lack affinity, so they're unlikely to give you a second gift, or it'll be harder to cultivate them towards a second gift because they don't identify with you yet. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're building your pipeline. So then moving on to nurture and cultivate. So this is where you get to know somebody. This is the dating part of my analogy. So how do we do that? It's about storytelling. The best cultivation stuff I see is telling stories. We as human beings are really tuned into stories. So think about that as kind of the founding principle of cultivating. You're telling stories. So you can do that through emails. You can send a series of emails that talk about each of your different programs or your core values or something like that. I've seen great series where each one has a more intense ask. So I send an email and say, hey, could you follow us on social? And then because a lot of email management systems are able to handle this, anybody who clicks on the link to take action then gets an email that says, hey, would you sign up to volunteer with us? And then those people get a donate ask. So there are ways you can also funnel people to figure out, like, who are these people who are actually wanting to buy into what we're doing. So think about cultivation. I like to think about cultivation as a series of asks that are not to donate yet. So it's, you know, do you share this on social? Could you do this next thing? Could you get more engaged with us? And building a pipeline kind of unto itself in this stage that is deepening people's engagements with your organization. So telling stories. So if you don't need volunteers, or this step-by-step series feels a little ambitious for you, can you send emails every other week or once a month that tell your stories? So the stories you can look for, your founding story. All organizations, I think, need a founding story, even if it's not a perfect narrative, crafted into a nice narrative. And that narrative is, there was a challenge facing our community, and there was an opportunity for us to fix it. And then our organization was created to do that. And this is how we've impacted the community since then. That's a really nice narrative arc that tells the story. If you can get your founding story into that kind of nice, neat package, it's really helpful. I've seen organizations do things like Q&A with a staff member or board member or volunteer. Those are really fun ways to share, kind of make people feel like they're inside your organization and a part of it. With permission, you can share stories of your clients or beneficiaries. And I would say, make sure, this was in a DEI training that, or not training, it was part of the CauseVox Summit a couple weeks ago, but Somebody noted if you're going to ask clients to share their story and you're going to make money off of it eventually, consider paying them for their time in sharing that story. I'll give you an example with an organization I worked with. It was a organization that did trainings with smaller organizations on climate change advocacy. And we shared a story about a smaller partner organization having a big impact based on that training. And so we wanted to elevate their story, but also show how our work made that work possible. And so we partnered on that appeal, we sent it out, and then we split the income from the appeal to make sure that it was kind of a fair distribution of the funds that we raised, because we did not want to be seen as making money off of their story and their work. Videos are also a great way to do this. Impact, sharing your impact. So after every victory or every once in a while, just report back and make sure that your donors know or make sure these people at this point, because they're not donors yet, know that if they donate to you, what results they can expect on the other side. And then of course, if you promise to provide information or tips or resources or reports or whatever, make sure that you're delivering that. And then other updates, other interesting happenings at your organizations, or if you're having people sign petitions and the petition triggers a change that you're looking for, making sure that you update the people who have been involved in that work is all part of the cultivation. Okay, and then convert or solicit. This is, will you marry me? This is the ask, right? So there are lots of different ways you can do this on your website, email and mail solicitations, in-person solicitations, and events. So very briefly, I'll walk through that. Your website, most people are not going to be converted immediately on your website. They're not going to hit your website and be like, oh, this is so inspiring, and donate. That's not really why everybody says you should have a donate button somewhere prominent on your homepage. It's because people might connect with you somewhere else and then remember your website, and then when they're on your website, they'll see the donate button and say, oh yeah, I've been getting all those great updates from that organization. Now is the time to donate. I actually very recently had an interaction with a donor who said they accidentally deleted an email appeal, had meant to give, went on the organization's website for another reason, and then saw the donate button and was like, oh yeah, they just sent me that great appeal, I want to donate. So that is more why you want the donate button to be prominent on your website, more than because it's going to convert somebody who hits your website for the first time. But it is a handy thing to do. Doing pop-ups on your website just to get it in somebody's face it can be helpful. It can convert people. It can also annoy people, so tread carefully. There's also things like this. I love Habitat for Humanity's homepage. They every few weeks change their the top photo and the message, but it's always something that calls your attention to why you should donate to them. And then having a pop-up donation form, just talking about when you drive people to your website to make a donation, make sure it's very easy, that it's not clunky, that it's very easy to see. For example, this is a CauseVox donation form. So choosing your frequency, one time or monthly, you want to make that obvious so they know. So I've seen donors on other platforms sign up for monthly and then say, oh, I didn't know I signed up for monthly. Whoops, can you cancel that? And that, that's always a bummer. Having an easy selection for the amount that's obvious, and then forms that are very easy, for not too many boxes, not too many check boxes for them to check or uncheck. I know it kind of, again, in our shoes, it feels like, well, if you want to donate to me, like you'll do what I need you to do to donate, but that's not true. In reality, if it's hard for people to donate, if the form is frustrating, if you ask for too much information, you're going to lose donors, and that's a real bummer of a reason to lose donors. So if your platform is a little clunky that you're using with your CRM, for example, talk to Candace about using CauseVox, because their forms are really really nice, really clear, and easy to use. So just make sure that donating is easy once people decide to do it. Then email and mail solicitations. So again, with email and mail solicitations, either one that you do, storytelling is key. And my advice is always to make the donor the hero. I know sometimes, especially if you're talking to program staff, they get a little pedantic about it and say like, well, we did it, the donor helped. But if you didn't have the donor's money, would you have been able to do it? That's what I always challenge program staff when they come at me with that. So I just want you to think about these two different asks. Help us feed 10 kids with your gift of $50 versus your gift of $50 feeds 10 kids. Which sounds more powerful to you? If you don't have a clear impact metric like that, or sorry, not metric, this is one that I used to use for an organization I worked with. Help us ban fracking in our state versus you could end fracking in our state. That puts the donor in the driver's seat. And I think especially right now with the state of the world, I think people are feeling really powerless. And there have been studies that show that donating is a way that people create change and renew their hope and believe that they can have an impact. So don't rob them of that opportunity by saying that they're going to help you make that impact. They are going to make that impact. So I like to make sure that I really hit this hard because I think it's really important to convert people, not treat the donor like your personal assistant. They're not helping you. They're part of the work that's happening. Another tip I like to say is learn from others. If there are other organizations in your space, or if you're a small local environmental group, and look at the national or environmental groups that you align with, for example, and sign up for their emails. Look at this, think about this pipeline, and can you look at other organizations whose work you really respect and see, now that I've unveiled this to you, can you see how they're doing this when they're cultivating people on social, through email, all of that kind of thing, all of those channels. So I think you can learn a lot by signing up for other organizations' emails. And then one other note, copywriting for email and mail solicitations could be a whole nother intensive, but I don't want to do that right here. But Tom Ahern's How to Write Fundraising Materials That Raise More Money is a great resource for how to actually write those solicitations. And he's right there with me on the donor is the hero in your narrative. So I just wanted to share an example of an appeal that I did with the Old Greenbelt Theater. And this is about thinking outside the box on this. I worked with the Old Greenbelt Theater to craft their year-end appeal a few years ago, and we wrote it as coming from the theater itself. What you have to understand was this was a cinema that was built in 1938. It's one of the last remaining movie theaters from that time period. So it's really a treasure. It's really a gem. And it had been in private hands for a long time. It was very run down. Parts of the building were falling apart. It was really a shame. And this organization, nonprofit, Friends of the Greenbelt Theater, came together. They raised money to renovate the lobby, and they took over management from the for-profit. It was quite an incredible story that they have. I'm not going to go into. But what we decided to do was write a letter from the building to the community that was about how the theater had been so sad and abandoned. And then this nonprofit came in and took over management and gave the theater a spruce. And now the theater gets visited by hundreds of people every weekend. And we had this nice part where the theater's favorite day of the week is Monday, because that's when there are a bunch of preschoolers there for story time on screen. And it was very cute. I'll show you, we even had a font that was the theater's handwriting. And we thought it was a little hokey, but we decided to give it a try. And it went totally gangbusters. Donors loved it. And then we've used it year after year after year. And this example is actually from the capital campaign that we did recently. that was asking for donations to convert the storefront next door into a secondary screening room. And so the narrative there was the theater was getting a little sister and wanted everybody to help make the theater's little sister's dreams come true. So it was, again, it went gangbusters. It was kind of weird, a little hokey, we thought, but then the community just really latched onto it. And I've seen other things like this do really, really well. So don't be afraid to think outside the box on the storytelling. That's the lesson in all of this. So then in-person solicitations. This is something that I recommend that you reserve for major gifts fundraising, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But it can be a powerful way to convert donors, especially if you know those donors are capable of giving you higher level gifts. So in person, I like to do kind of a warm-up greeting, talk to them. What do they know about the organization? Do they have questions about your organizations? And then talk about a specific challenge your organization is facing, ideally based on what you know about this donor. It could be, you want it to be something that you know they care about, and then ask if they could help you by donating. And I think a lot of people are really, really scared of in-person solicitations because they're afraid the other person will say no. And it kind of stems from everybody's deep-seated fear of rejection, I think. But I see a lot of people feel much more empowered on the in-person solicitations, or now it would be more, I guess, Zoom person solicitations right now. But if you can see that no isn't a rejection, it's a data point, and it's information that will be helpful in eventually getting a gift from that donor. No may not mean never. More often it means not right now. So maybe the donor just isn't quite there yet. They lack affinity, or they've got something else going on in their life that means they can't make a big gift at the moment. So one of the things I say is don't shut down when you hear a no. Talk to them about why. When I've done this in the past, I've gotten things like, my child just got into a private college that's way more expensive than we were planning on paying, so I'm trying to figure out how we're going to handle that. They're not saying no to me. It's nothing I did wrong in the cultivation process with them. It's just that they've got something going on that means they don't feel like they have the cash on hand right now. So that's something I said, okay, that's fine. I cultivated that person for a few years, but I put them on the back burner. I went back 3 years later. His daughter was getting ready to graduate and asked and got a $10,000 check. So, you know, it's data, it's not rejection. So that's something that I think is helpful when we think about in-person solicitations. And then events. A couple notes on events. A lot of people use events to convert donors, and it's a perfectly great way to get donations. I tend to think of this more as people who come to your events are actually in the attraction phase of your pipeline, because they probably haven't given the max of what they're capable of. So events, as far as fundraising, they are the lowest return on investment as far as like cost per dollar raised. That's changing a little bit right now, because as more and more people are having to do virtual events, that return on investment, the cost is going way down. So I'm curious to see how that changes things even post-pandemic. But a lot of organizations are seeing a bigger return right now because the costs are so much less. However, events, the tough part on the fundraising front is they're the least personalized asks. And also they're the hardest to renew, because the buying a ticket is a transaction. It's not really a donation. So that's why I say I treat those people as I do the people who just gave me their email. A ticket is a transaction, it's not a donation. So they might not give again if you don't invite them to that same event. It is, on the flip side, it is an easy ask because it isn't a donation, you're asking them for a transaction. So it can be a good way to build a donor base if you're starting out. But if you're thinking of this as your main conversion or solicitation point, that's something you might want to reconsider, and think about that being more the attraction points. Stewardship. So this is about keeping the flame alive after you've gotten a gift. So if, just a note on donor retention, industry-wide, this is based on a 2018 AFP report, is about 45.5%. So that means organizations are losing over half the donations they attract every single year. So you've got to start thinking about the second gift the minute you get the first gift. And what I tend to see is people think they ask for a gift, the donor makes a gift, done. That's kind of a transaction mentality. If you're thinking as the donor pipeline, if you're thinking about stewardship, if you're thinking about you're building a relationship with this person to cultivate them to higher and higher levels of giving, then the first gift is really just the initial. It's saying, yes, I will marry you. So using that marriage analogy, if you propose and somebody says yes, you don't walk away and then go find somebody else to date, right? You're building a relationship, you're taking your relationship to the next level. So think of a donor donating to you as, oh good, now I get to take this relationship to the next level. Not that it's a transaction that is now done. So stewardship. I like to say the first key is think early and think often. You should send an automated email immediately after receiving that gift. Most donor CRMs let you drive donors to specific donation pages that correspond to a specific campaign or appeal that you've sent. Then you can make a customized thank you email that is relevant to that campaign that you're running, that will send a thank you note, a thank you email immediately upon receipt of that gift. Make sure you do that. That's not the end. So for bigger gifts, especially big for your organization, you can set where that line is, but sending a handwritten note, especially for big first donations, can be a really important way to show how much you appreciate that donor. And then really for me, the magic is in doing thank you calls. The more thank you calls you can make, the better. This is really the ultimate in donor stewardship because you're having a one-on-one interaction with that donor. Even if you're really, really busy, I would encourage you to figure out how to make thank you calls. One of the things I used to do as a frontline fundraiser was first thing in the morning before I opened my email, since I'm on the East Coast and I was working for an international organization, I would call the donors that I knew would be awake at that hour to say thank you. And then it was the last thing I would do at the end of the day before I left home. And that's when I would call West Coast donors. And so that was something that it was nice for me because I started my day and ended my day with gratitude. So it was a fun thing for me to do, but also it helped me get through a lot of these calls. Thank you calls are responsible for the single largest bump I've ever seen in donor retention at an organization. And this is also where big organizations that have big marketing operations, they can out-steward you, right? If you're a small organization. But calls are where you can out-steward the big organizations. Most big organizations won't call donors who donate under $5,000. $5,000 is a small gift for them. And so if you're calling somebody who just donates $50 to your organization to say thank you, it's going to go a very long way. So I encourage you to make thank you calls or try and make that part of your operation. And then reporting back, make sure you plan periodic updates to your donors. Make sure they're in tune with what the gift was made for. So if they donate to, I don't know, one campaign or one effort, and then you report back on a different effort, they're going to get a little confused about where their gift went. So make sure you keep cultivating them, again, in the way that they were acquired. And I'll talk a little bit more about report backs when we go through annual planning later on. Then finally, before we take a break, just resolicitation. It's about getting that second gift. Make sure you're making an ask that's relevant to their prior giving. Personalize it. So one thing I like to do is do something like, last year you gave $50. could you double your gift to $100 this year? That's a way, to remind them of how much they've given to you previously, but it also customizes it to them. So there are things you can do to personalize your solicitations beyond just saying dear first name. And then again, calls here, doing follow-up calls. If you send emails, if you're doing an email campaign, follow up with calls. Did you see our email? Your gift last year helped us do this, and I'm hoping you could give again. Could you double to this amount? So again, you're also reinforcing the ask that you made. And then there are different theories about when to resolicit, and I think it's really dependent on your organization, your operation. Some people say resolicit immediately, within a few weeks. Some say within 3 months, annually. That's something to think about as you build your pipeline, and something to gather data on as you go. So that's about resolicitation. I want to pause here and see if we have any questions as we reach the top of the first hour. Candace, do you have?
Yeah, so Wesley asked, because you were talking a little bit about doing some of those in-person or door-to-door fundraising activities.
Yeah.
And so basically Wesley was asking, like, how do you do that during COVID, and
Yeah.
is that appropriate, or I guess what are some alternatives as well?
Yeah, I mean, I would say consider your tone as you're doing this. I've seen a number of organizations doing more one-on-one Zoom calls, or, Google Hangouts, different things like that. Actually, one organization that I'm connected with that I donate to had one of their board members reach out to me just via email, and she said, hey, I would just love to catch up with you on the phone sometime. And so doing just phone calls right now, at least what I'm seeing in the operations I'm working on, a lot more people are picking up their phones now, I think, because we're a little starved for human interaction. So just picking up a phone and calling a donor and saying, like, I've been doing this with one organization I work with. We've been calling through their donors and just saying, hey, you haven't made a donation recently. I'm not calling for that. We just wanted to check on you and see how you're doing. This is the Old Greenbelt Theater. So it's an organization we're used to seeing a lot of our donors in our theater every week, or at least once or twice a month. And so it totally felt appropriate to us to reach out to those people and just say, hey, we haven't seen you in a couple months because we've been closed, and we really miss you, and how are things going? Because it was replicating the interaction they would have had with us had we been open, because they know our staff and all of that kind of thing. So I think you want to pitch it to a tone that's right for your organization. I mean, if you don't have a normal engagement point with people, it might be weird to just be like, hey, I'm calling to check in on you. But thinking about your operation and what would feel like an authentic way of checking in with people right now is really important. And then I would say, as far as asking for gifts, I totally get that pressure. There are a lot of people unemployed. There are a lot of people who are fine too. So keep that in mind. That's also data points you can gather by doing face-to-face calls or emails that ask for input or something. One of the things the theater has done by calling all of these donors is we've got a pretty good assessment of who of our donors is unemployed and in kind of financial difficulty right now, and who is not. And so we're kind of working on, okay, how do we use that information for our year-end appeal so that we don't ask people who are already hurting, but that we maximize what we're trying to get out of people who do have the ability to give at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great answer. And so I just want to open it up at this time to give people the opportunity to chat in more questions. There's a lot that we're talking about today, a lot of different engagements, and talking about nurturing. So Yeah, I guess for you guys, are there any specific hurdles that you're facing at your organization that you have trouble with, or that you feel like is kind of like a unique uphill battle for you? And then we can kind of tackle one or two of those specific questions because it's likely that others in the class could have similar challenges as well. So, yeah, what are your challenges with starting individual giving? Give people a minute. And also, how's everybody doing? Everybody staying focused?
Get up, jump around for a minute.
You know, we know that 2 hours is a commitment, and so yeah. Thanks for hanging in there for the next hour as we get into our next section in a minute. So,
Addie.
Yeah, so Addie asked, time has been a huge challenge in buy-in and communication with program staff and leadership. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I guess like how would you say, what recommendations do you have for Addie?
Yeah. Time is always a challenge, right? I haven't met a single nonprofit professional that doesn't feel that pinch. I think really, really good planning is key to the time issue. The least strapped for time I've ever felt as a frontline fundraiser was when I worked for an organization that was really just starting their individual giving program. And I was able to sit down and kind of map out the year based on, okay, this is a segment of donors I want to cultivate towards monthly giving. This is a segment I want to cultivate towards major giving. And then this is how I want to go after new donors. And I was able to kind of map that out so that, January I was focused on, stewardship from people who gave the year before. And then February, I was focused on starting up relationships with new major donors. And then March and April, I focused on building up monthly giving. And so mapping out the year, I think sometimes what we end up doing, I've also worked for an organization that had its major gala at the beginning of November, and then it was just straight into the year-end appeal, and and then by January we were all dead, right? So and then that organization, after a few years, the fundraising staff went to the ED and went, "We're having a spring gala. There's no debate about this because we're spent by the end of the year, and we can't be doing both of these major things that our income depends on." At the same time, basically, it's too much for a small staff. So sometimes it's just mapping out your year to make sure that two major efforts aren't about to conflict. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the annual planning section. Buy-in and communication with program staff and leadership. Also a challenge and hard to advise when I don't know more about your organization, but this is again where really good plans and having a really good annual plan, having a really good strategic plan for your fundraising operation can be a great buy-in point, particularly with leadership. I've had really good success with that, instead of trying to, haul them along as you're trying to, write an appeal and then the next thing, it's helpful to, as you're doing your annual planning, have a plan that you can take to them and say, this is what we're doing, and this is all the reasons why, and here's the analysis, and this is what I need from you. Some of the work that I've done has been most successful when I've had that annual plan. I get a blessing from leadership that, like, yes, that looks like what we need for this organization. And then I say, great, to hit these goals, I need these things from you. But then I can kind of go and execute on my own and leave them to one side for a while. But then being able to come back and say, like, you blessed this plan and you said you do this, so this is how I need you to do it. Addie just said, it's been hard to pitch the importance of relationship building for all staff. involved, and to remember/create a system to communicate information about specific volunteers, donors, etc. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Oh, I've been there. I had an ED once that I was the development director for, and all he wanted to do was like, oh, I found this thing. This website says that you can raise hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2 months. And I was like, no, you can't. You can only do that with really solid relationship building. So Addie, for that, I would say finding that information, finding reports. AFP, Association for Fundraising Professionals, has their fundraising effectiveness project has some really good information on that. Bloomerang also has some great information on the importance of stewardship for donors. I assume, Candace, that CauseVox has materials on that too, and why it's important. All of those sources, finding those reports and showing data and evidence has often been the most powerful tool I've had convincing boards and leadership and that kind of thing. Is I'm not crazy here. This is not my personal hobby horse. This is what the data says is important and why it's important and that kind of thing. I also think if run the numbers on your donor retention. If your donor retention is less than industry average, that's a key thing that would say to me, red alert, we're not doing enough relationship building, because if you're constantly losing donors, that is an indictment of your stewardship and relationship building. So I'm not saying that's your problem. I'm just saying that that's also something you can draw their attention to say, this is why the relationship building is important. But yeah, Addie, I'll say if you want to use your coaching hour to talk through that, when I give that information at the end, I'd be happy to talk to you more specifically about how to do that with your organization. But those are just some general tips I have.
Perfect. And then I think we have time for maybe one more question here. So there's a few more questions, but we can save some for the end as well. But So Wesley asked, starting from scratch with a paid list of corporate responsibility personnel, we probably shouldn't start with the ask. Sending a cold email to start, what is some advice as to where to begin? Like what should some of that content, I guess, be in that first email, would you recommend?
So I try to start, especially if it's bigger gifts that you can get. I don't know what your list consists of and what companies, but I tend to start with trying to meet them face to face. I feel like that's a great way to build affinity, and putting a face, one, to the person you're contacting and that they're talking to is helpful. And I find, especially people who are tasked with corporate social responsibility, that's kind of something that they expect to have happen. And so they're very willing to do meetings with organizations. What I would say is, first, do your research on the company and make sure that your organization fits within their parameters. I got hauled along to a meeting once to a CSR person by the ED of a nonprofit I worked for very briefly, and he told me he had talked to somebody and we were within their giving parameters, and I said, well, that's not what I saw on the website, so I don't think this is a good use of time. And then we got there and the CSR person was like, you're not within our giving parameters. And that's a lot of wasted time and effort. So make sure, one, that you align with their priorities and that kind of thing, because just because they have a CSR office does not mean you're within what they're interested in. It's the same with foundations, right? If you go to a foundation that says they give to these causes and you're outside of that, you're not going to get a grant from that foundation. So you can kind of think of it in the same way. But yeah, I like to start with an email to that person that says, hey, I'm Kelly. This is my role at the organization. This is what we do. This is what you say is a priority for your funding. I think, we could have a really great relationship. I would just really love to have some time to sit down with you and talk about it. So that's how I generally start those interactions when I've done that in the past.
That's great advice. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah.
So should we just dive right into the next part? I know there's a
Sure.
couple more questions, but we can always get to those at the end as
Sure.
well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see, let's get going. All right, so upgrading. So once you've gotten your kind of basic pipeline set up and established, then you want to start thinking about how cultivating, resoliciting, and ideally upgrading your donors at this point. Let's see, if you do stewardship well, donors will move up to higher levels of giving and or frequency of giving. So maybe it's somebody who gives you $50 at year end, maybe they'll sign up to give you $20 a month. That's going to increase the amount that they give and the consistency of their giving. Most upgrading, I think about falling into these categories of monthly, major giving, or bequest and legacy giving. And those categories are not mutually exclusive. There's nothing saying that you can't accomplish major giving by having somebody give monthly, or actually monthly donors and bequest donors tend to line up pretty well. So people on fixed incomes who can't give you a big major gift might give you a small monthly gift for a long time and then put a bequest in their will to your organization. So those they all overlap. These aren't, a donor is going to fall into one of these three categories. It's a little murky, but these are ways that I think about how we upgrade people. Monthly giving especially can make it easier for people to give major gifts. So someone who can only give you $25 in a single donation might be able to give you $10 a month, and that's $120. So that's a huge upgrade if you add a monthly giving component to your major giving or to your individual giving program. And so once you have these donors, you want to think about another pipeline. So yay, pipelines. So you want to think about another pipeline where the solicitation and convert point is a monthly or major giving ask. And so you want to think of it as building that flow towards another ask while they're still on your main giving pipeline, if that makes sense. So now I want to talk about scaling up your operation. So wherever you are, these different methods can help you grow. So that I'm not saying you have to have a pipeline where you get annual gifts from, and renew 60% of them before you can scale up. You can use these tools as points to build up your pipeline at any point, really. So ways to scale that I'm going to talk about: peer-to-peer, monthly program or membership programs. I love membership programs. Monthly giving, major giving, and then legacies and bequests. I'm going to try, and this is going to be a flyover view, just to be totally honest with everybody. This is a flyover view of all of these things. These could all be a webinar unto themselves. So this is something where if one of these sounds right for your operation, you might want to seek out other information on these things. And again, I'm offering a free 1-hour coaching call after this. So if there's one you want to explore for your organization, I would love to talk to you all about that. So peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer is a type of fundraising where you ask your supporters to fundraise for you, and you'll need a platform like CauseVox to make that easy for them to do. And I would say I've always run peer-to-peer on CauseVox, so I'm a big fan of CauseVox and their peer-to-peer platform. So if you found CauseVox this way, I do encourage you to use them for trying peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer is actually really fun. I really enjoy peer-to-peer. You can do peer-to-peer as an event. So I think that's what a lot of people, when they think peer-to-peer, they think of these types of events. So like a 5K, fun run, polar bear plunge, bowling league, different things like that. There's an event tied to the peer-to-peer. I see this most often with schools and like healthcare causes. Candace could maybe chime in and see what all she's seen. But I think when people think peer-to-peer, they're thinking of like a 5K fun run type of event. But that's not all you can do with peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer can be actually really, really powerful, even when you don't have an event you're driving towards. For example, the Old Greenbelt Theater, I worked with them to use a peer-to-peer style campaign as part of a capital campaign that they were running. So when they were raising money to renovate the theater that had been gotten all run down, we called it the Save Me a Seat campaign. And after we'd secured the majority of like the major gifts to support the core of the capital campaign, when we started doing the public facing portion of the campaign, we did it through kind of a peer-to-peer program. It was kind of a modified peer-to-peer, so it wasn't pure peer-to-peer, but we encouraged donors to save a seat. It was $250 to save a seat in the theater. And then once they saved a seat, we encouraged them to get their friends to save seats. So we used that peer-to-peer co-solicitation. I did it, can you do it too? Kind of solicitation style to do the campaign. And I'm very pleased to report our goal was $100,000 and they raised the goal was $100,000 and we raised $122,000 that way. So it was really, really powerful. And that organization, when we did that, the Old Greenbelt Theater organization was, I think, only 3 years old. So you don't have to have been doing it for a while. You don't have to have a huge base of support. Peer-to-peer is a helpful donor acquisition tool. On the flip side, it does require a fair amount of prep and planning if you want to do it well. I've seen organizations say, oh, peer-to-peer will be magic. We'll just set up a peer-to-peer site and then tweet about it and everyone will come out of the woodwork. I think Candace can probably tell you that's not how most of them go. So you do need to do some prep work and some planning. There's a lot of support and nurturing you need to do of the participants in your peer-to-peer program. And actually I did a course with Candace and CauseVox on peer-to-peer that's available on their website if this is interesting to you, that dives way more into that, how to do peer-to-peer well.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and paste that course in the chat as well in case anyone's interested.
Perfect. Thanks, Candace.
Of course. Thank you.
Yes, so I love peer-to-peer. It's very fun. I also love membership programs. These are really, really great for newer organizations too. I like to create these kind of founders circle type style membership programs. The nice thing is you set benefits for association with the program. So I say, if you give us $100 annually, you can expect, you know, an invitation quarterly to a conference call with our executive director, and you know, and a donor appreciation event every year, something like that that has benefits. But the things that I think are most powerful about membership programs are having an annual renewal of a membership. Helps a lot with lapse prevention. So you can send an email to people and say, last year at this time you made a gift. Do you want to re-up your membership? And it's maybe a little bit easier. It's on that line between relationship-based fundraising and transactional fundraising that just gives you a point or a reason to be checking in around the anniversary of their last gift to say, hey, we've really enjoyed having you as part of our program, in our program. We hope you've gotten a lot out of it. Will you renew now so that you can continue to be a member with us? The other thing I think is powerful is it holds you accountable for delivering benefits. So the nice thing is if you say, if you donate $100, we're going to do these things. There's some level of accountability for yourself in your work. You have to make sure you deliver those things. And the donor knows what to expect. So when you fulfill those things, it's very nice. It's very neatly packaged, which is helpful. I would say go here very cautiously. Only provide benefits you know that you can deliver. I have seen membership programs where they say, oh, you're gonna get these 10 10 different things for $100. And then as a fundraiser, I look at that and say, you're going to waste all my money just delivering those things to me. But also, then they don't deliver on those things. And then that breaks some faith with your donors. So go there cautiously. But I've seen really, really great results for organizations that literally it's a, quarterly Zoom meeting with their executive director, and people really enjoy that, and it makes them feel involved. So the nice thing about membership programs is if you can align benefits that make people feel involved and engaged and get insider information on your organization, that actually you're using the membership program benefits to steward that donor. So I think that's what I really like about that. So when you're thinking about this, if you're thinking this might be the right way to go, think about benefits that promote cultivation and stewardship and a feeling of being part of your nonprofit's team for your members. And what I'm definitely not talking about are keychains and t-shirts and bumper stickers and things like that. That's very transactional, and what I want you to focus on is things like conference calls or reports or an annual tour of your facility when it's safe to do that. That kind of thing. That's what membership program benefits I see that that kind of drive the next gift and for your members, if that makes sense. I've seen this be really good for organizations that have facilities like museums and cinemas and different things like that. But I've also seen advocacy organizations do it very well. So think about how that might work for your organization and if that might be a good choice for you. Then monthly giving solicitations and programs are kind of an art unto themselves. So I'm not going to dive too deep into that right now. What I would recommend if you think this is something you want to do, Erica Wasdorp has this great book called Monthly Giving, The Sleeping Giant, that is basically a manual on how to do monthly giving for your organization. It's a super great book that I've used a number of times in my career. And basically, if you have a core of donors who have given to you 2 to 3 years in a row, that's when a monthly giving program can be really powerful. If you already have donors who have been giving annually, it is a good next step to get bigger gifts, but spread out throughout the year. The other thing that is really powerful about monthly giving is that a donor, it's really easy for the donor. It's set it and forget it. They put in their credit card once, and basically they would have to actively stop giving to you. Otherwise, it just keeps going until their credit card expires. And most CRMs and donor management systems that I've seen lately have ways to notify either you or the donor when their credit card is about to expire, so that there's no lag in the gifts and they don't stop giving. So it's something that makes it very, very easy for the donor. And it's great as a nonprofit because then you're getting a certain amount of monthly gifts. I worked for an organization that had a really strong monthly giving program, and we got about $1,000 a month just from our monthly giving program. It was a small nonprofit, but the monthly giving accounted for, I think, about a third of the income we were getting. And so it was very, it's a very, very helpful thing to add to your operation. The other reason I like it is because donors who can normally give you, $50 if you're asking for it all at once, people who give $50 can tend to do $10 or $20 a month. And then you're talking, the magnitude of the impact of the increase there is really helpful. My caution on monthly giving is don't let the fact that it's set it and forget it for the donor stop you from stewarding them. I see a lot of nonprofits drive donors to monthly giving, and then those donors never hear from the nonprofit again. Those are your committed core. Those are probably your most committed donors. So if anything, they should hear from you more. And not because you're having to cultivate them or reactivate them or anything, but because these are the people who who can, you know, really form the foundation of your individual giving program. So when you think about monthly giving, make sure you're including them. And monthly giving doesn't preclude people from giving at year end or to specific campaigns. Monthly givers tend to also give at year end, and monthly givers also are great prospects for major giving. And in fact, if you have a monthly giving set up and you ask somebody for $1,000, make sure you tell them, and I can get that all at once, or we can break it up monthly through our monthly giving program. And then I have seen, when I've made sure donors know that, you know, you can make a $5,000 gift, but do it monthly, people can say yes to that more easily than, you know, write me a check for $5,000 right now. So something to consider with monthly giving. So major gifts. Most small nonprofits I have worked with get really nervous when I start talking with them about getting into the major gifts game. It sounds very scary, and most trainings I have attended personally treat major giving like it's this monstrous task and something only universities and giant nonprofits can pull off because you need so many resources to do it. I really think that's a myth. I've seen lots of small nonprofits do really, really well. Candace mentioned this when introducing me, but one organization that I worked with for 4 years, when I stepped in, their individual giving program was raising $250,000, $300,000 annually. And in 4 years, we got that up to $1 million annually. And I think they've continued growing it since I've not been with them. But doing that in 4 years was massive. It took a lot of work, but it can be done. And on top of that, we were also building a membership program for low dollar donors, running a gala every year, and doing a number of other small gift things as well. So we were doing it on top of everything else. So I promise it can be done. You just have to break it up a little bit. So you want to start small. A major gift, kind of the way it's talked about in the nonprofit industry writ large, is about $5,000 or more. But I always say, if you're starting out, you define what a major gift is for your nonprofit. So take a look, pull the list of annual giving for your donors for the past 2 to 3 years, and then look at what are the amounts in the top 10% of that, and then see if somewhere around there makes sense to set your major giving point. Excuse me. So the organization I just mentioned that we moved to $1 million, when I started working with them, we counted a major gift as anything above $250. So if somebody gave us $250 or more, we treated them as a major donor, and we put them into this more personalized cycle. Then about a year later, we reassessed and we found, oh, we'd done so well with that. Actually, our top 10% of gifts was more $500 and above. And so the next year, we kind of created kind of this mid-level cultivation status, the low dollar gifts, and a major giving program. And then the next year it was $1,000, and I've checked in with them more recently, and now they're at $5,000 annually. So we worked our way up to that, but it took, you know, it's been a number of years, probably 8 or 9 years, and they're just now getting to that $5,000, which is kind of in the industry what's considered a major gift. But we did it and we got there, and so you can do it too, is what I'm trying to say. So start small, think about the threshold of what is a major gift for your organization, and then I like to start people out with 10 prospects. Can you go through your donor roll and find 10 people that are not currently at that giving level, but that you think, cultivate them into that giving level. And then you create a pipeline for those donors and try to cultivate them towards that bigger gift. That's really all you need to get started. And I say 10 prospects because it can kind of be a beta test for a major gifts program before you like dive deep and really invest in it. And then you want to repeat the donor cycle with very personal touches, calls, and meetings, which now you're going to have to do virtually. But one of the things that kind of how I would program it at a number of nonprofits that I worked for is I would call the donor that I had identified and ask them if they would be interested in meeting with me. You could do it over Zoom right now, but I would say face-to-face where somebody can see you is what you want to ask them for. And then I do one cultivation meeting where I was not going to ask. I just wanted to get to know them. What was their interest level in our nonprofit? What's going on in their life? How did they connect to our nonprofit? Creating a relationship between me and that donor. And then I would send them for a couple months personal updates on things that they had said they were interested in. And this is why I say start small with 10, because you can see how this can become a monstrous task if you're cultivating 20 or 50 donors. But I would send them individualized, hey, so-and-so just did this blog post. I remembered in our conversation you mentioned being interested in how we do this. So here's a blog post about it, interested to hear what you think about it, that kind of thing. Build that relationship. And then I ask for a second solicitation meeting, usually 3 or 4 months afterward, if I've been able to cultivate them consistently and talk to them once or twice a month. And at that point, I solicit them and say, we've got this challenge and we'd really love your help in addressing this challenge. And do you think you might be able to make a gift of $500, $1,000 to help us address this issue in our community? And then going from there. And one of the things I know a lot of people find asks very, very scary. And I've unpacked that a lot. I've done a lot of work with boards about why that feels so scary to people. Often it is because we don't want to hear no, it's rejection. This is a little bit what I talked about before. But it's not rejection, it's data. And also the other thing that I usually tell fundraisers or executive directors or board members that I work with that are very scared of solicitations is I totally see how asking people for money can be scary, because you don't want to seem needy or beggy or, I think we often think about it as, oh, I'm asking for me. But if you can really understand that you're asking on behalf of your nonprofit, and if you can also help your board members, especially need help with this, what does $1,000 do for your nonprofit? What does $250 do for your nonprofit? And help them understand that you getting that gift helps grow our impact. So you're not asking for you. Go out there and ask for the members of our community who need this money. And often I have found that getting over that initial fear and thinking about it more in terms of, oh, I'm asking on behalf of my community, not on my own behalf, gets them over that hump. And then once they do it a few times, they get more and more comfortable with it. So it's a process. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's some of the work that I've done on major gifts and individual solicitations to get people over it. You can also warm up your board with thank you calls. I know sometimes even getting them to do thank you calls is hard, but warming them up and getting them involved in the fundraising process can really help. And then if the donor says yes, then I often will then punt the donor to our executive director or a board member to do a follow-up call or meeting to say thank you and to steward them further, because again, when they say yes to the gift, that's not the end of the transaction. It's the beginning of a higher level relationship. And that's when I want to elevate them to the executive director or the board to kind of increase that engagement level. So that's major gifts. Bequests and legacy, get donors to put your organization in their will. I know a lot of people really shy away from legacy and bequest giving because it feels real creepy, or you don't want to talk to your donors about them dying. And I totally hear you. They can be uncomfortable conversations. But again, with major giving, when you're making major gifts asks, I often say, you're not asking for yourself, you're asking on behalf of the organization. I kind of come at legacy giving with that same spirit, is if I've cultivated this donor well, this is not going to come out of nowhere for them. And it's going to be something that I can use to say, hey, you know, you've given to us every year for the past 10 years. We really appreciate that. And every year you're giving us more. And I want to see if you'd be open to this additional way of supporting our organization. We really love you. We've come to rely on you as part of our organization. And you know, you leaving a bequest to us in your will is something that will leave a lasting mark on our organization. And that kind of thing, not talking about, hey, when you die, can you give us a lot of money? I'm talking about how much they've supported our organization in their lifetime and how much we want them to keep that going indefinitely, right? And that's what they can do through a legacy or bequest gift. Most often I don't actually like solicit, I don't have a target and go to a donor and ask them about this. Usually the way I go about this is I target donors that I think would be open to legacy and bequests with PSs. So I'll send an email appeal to our broad donor base and then send a subset of them that same email appeal with a PS that says something like, you can make an even bigger impact by including us in your will. You know, reply to this email and I'll talk to you about how to do that. So more often than not, I have had these conversations not as me initiating them, but as somebody stepping forward and saying, oh, hey, I saw that I can put your organization in my will. I'm interested in doing that. So I've more had success with this, just kind of putting it out there and seeing who raises their hands. I know other organizations do slightly more, more targeting, more attempts to cultivate people towards this, but that's what I've had the most success in doing with legacy. Just to note some points of solicitation that you have. The main times people update their will is when you want to solicit them about a legacy gift. Often there are 2 points. People update their wills when they become grandparents. I know this well. My parents just did it after I had my daughter. People, when they're becoming grandparents, rewrite their will because they want to put their grandchildren in it. But also they know more or less what their kids are making and if their kids are financially secure. And so this is a point where people can tend to update their will to take care of their grandkids, but are also at a point where they don't need to take care of their kids anymore. So they're more willing to put nonprofits into their will. And also people redo their wills often when their grandchildren become adults. So how do you find out about that? This is about talking to your donors about what's going on in their lives. And this is, again, I will put in a plug for doing thank you calls. That's how you find out if people are at that point with your organization. So, so that's just something to think about. Lots of people are redoing their wills right now, which feels super morbid to me, but it's a reality right now. So just something to note is you want to put your legacy bequest information out there on occasion. It doesn't have to be a hard campaign, but having sample bequest language ready and putting that as a subnote in email appeals can be a helpful tool. So now getting into annual planning, how do you manage all of this? So we've talked about this whole pipeline and ways to scale up and all the individual pipelines you need to have. So how do you actually do it? How do you implement it? When I'm starting with a new organization, either as a staff member or consulting with them, I look at past income and look at where we need to go. So I've got the data on the past 2 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, sometimes if it's an older organization. And I look at, okay, where do we need to go in the next couple of years? So this is a great point to, you know, if you haven't done a SWOT analysis of your operation in a while, this is a good point to do that. What are your strengths in your fundraising program? What are your weaknesses? What things are working? What is not? What things have you tried? Why did they work or not work? I see a lot of organizations that say like, oh, we tried that and it didn't work. And then I say, why did it not work? And they said, we don't know, we just didn't raise any money. So really think at a deeper core level, like why did something you try not work? And is it just maybe that type of fundraising is right for you, you just didn't do it in the right way in the past. So this is a good time to do a lot of reflection. And then once you have some targets, you want to think about the pipeline and the different scale up opportunities that we talked about and choose what seems right, and then assign goals to each of those efforts. So if you need to raise $250,000 in individual giving in a year, where is that going to come from? Break it down. When you have a nebulous goal of $250,000 from individual donors and all of our efforts, it's hard to really target and zoom into individual efforts. But then, so I want you to say, okay, we got $100,000 from our fundraising event last year, and we want to raise that again and convert 10% of the people from that event into monthly givers. Like that's a very good concrete thing you can work on. Or our year-end appeal specifically needs to raise $50,000 this year, which is $10,000 more than last year. Getting down into those goals for each effort is a really helpful way to think about, you know, last year our year-end appeal raised $40,000. This year it needs to be $50,000. So what do we need to do to make that happen? And then you can build your pipelines for each of those efforts with those targets in mind. So I want to show you, this is a very, very, very simple planning chart that I've used when I'm just starting to think through the pipelines. I look at the full year and I look at each segment in my pipeline, and then so you see attraction, cultivation, solicitation, first-time donor cultivation. If it's a repeat donor, do I have a different plan for them? And then major donors, what is my plan for major donors? And then this, to Addie's question about time management, this is how I make sure that I'm not doing all the things all at once. So I have the months across, and then I have the stages of my pipeline, and when am I gonna do each thing? And then you can see the bottom row, I've got major donors, so that's how I'm gonna build my major donor pipeline across the year. And there's value in doing it very simply like this, even if you're planning to build up and do, you know, more robust planning beyond this. But this is a really visual, easy way to look at where the work is spread out so that you're not trying to do, you know, 20 things in September and you've got nothing in July and August. So it's particularly important, I think this kind of planning is particularly important if you're responsible for more than just fundraising. So I'm talking about executive directors who don't have a fundraising staff who are responsible for fundraising. What I've done when I've done planning with folks like that is then I have all of the other things they're responsible for, and when do those hit, to make sure you're not trying to solicit 10 major donors the same month that you've got to like launch your back to school programs or something like that. So this mapping out this way is really helpful in both to see if you're just in fundraising, how to see how your year is going to pan out, but also to set that against other things you're responsible for if you're not only a fundraiser. CauseVox also has this planning chart that is significantly more robust. So I would say like start with that simple one, and then you want to move towards something like this too. This is much more robust, and as you can see, it's got fundraising activities, the associated costs. I love that it's got staff hours, because so often we don't think about the staff hours that go into fundraising efforts as part of the cost, but this really helps with that. And then it's got the costs associated and everything, how that aligns to your bigger goals. So once you can move towards more robust planning, I really encourage you to check this out from CauseVox. Candace, can you share, is this going out later, or is this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just put both examples in the chat. So the one that you shared, Kelly,
Okay.
that's available to view. And then the fundraising planning guide, same thing. And you can, I guess, download those as well from the Google Sheets. So,
Awesome.
yeah, thanks for
Awesome.
sharing those examples.
Yeah, so those are 2 examples. And then no matter how you track it, you're going to want to do more project management work to tackle building of the full program. And for that, I have 2 resources I really like to recommend. One is Productive Flourishing, and they have this momentum planner. It's fairly cheap. I think it's somewhere like $12, $18, somewhere in there. But it helps you take big goals or big projects and boil them down to what you're going to do each day, which is really helpful. And then the Management Center's book, Managing to Change the World, is also a great resource to more full operations management, but also it's very applicable to a fundraising operation as well. So a couple planning tips before we wrap up here. I love to say, don't get distracted by shiny objects. There are lots of people and companies out there that promise really quick results if you just sign up for their platform. But that distracts you from the real work of building a tried and true system of creating a solid pipeline. There is no magic bullet out there in fundraising. There are no shortcuts to a good donor program. There is a difference though between those things that are quick, easy fundraisers versus tools. Having really, really good tools is critical as you do individual giving. The first tool is a really good donor management software. There are a lot of great ones on the market. So looking into, based on your needs and your budget, looking for a donor management software is absolutely critical. I've stepped into a number of organizations where I say, where's your donor database? And they hand me an Excel spreadsheet, and that is not a donor management system. And then there are online giving platforms like CauseVox that make giving easy for your donors, that give you data that is very robust and helpful in managing your program. And so online giving platforms like CauseVox can really amplify your results because they help build a better donor pipeline. So a good donor management system is not a donor pipeline. Having a good online tool is not a donor pipeline. But if you use really great tools, it's going to help do a lot of the work for you, which is helpful. But yeah, my bottom line is, if it seems quick and easy, it's probably not good fundraising, or it's a shortcut, or you're not seeing maybe the background work and the pipeline that you have to build around a certain effort. So so that's just a couple parting notes from me. I promised I would tell you how to get a free coaching session with me. So if you need some help talking through this or implementing, if you visit fitnonprofit.com/CauseVox, you can submit a request for a 60-minute coaching session with me. And I will look forward to talking you through some of this, answering additional questions you have. And then I offer very affordable packages to help organizations get up and running on this too, if that's something you're interested in. So that's from me. These are the resources that I recommended throughout the session. I failed to mention, it was in my notes and I failed to mention, I will be doing a year-end giving course with Candace and CauseVox in October that I'm very, very excited about. So you can look for that too, but these are the different resources, and when Candace sends out the slides to you, this will be in there. So don't worry about taking furious notes, it's all there. So Candace, do you want to say a little bit about CauseVox, and then we can turn over to Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kelly. I think all of this has been so helpful. And just to hear it all broken down into such simple, like not easy to implement, but like very straightforward, process driven steps that really do actually make it easy, or you make it sound very easy. So it's been a great session today. So yeah, so for anyone that's interested, feel free to check out CauseVox. CauseVox is a digital fundraising tool that helps you raise more with less effort, so you can implement a donation page right on your website, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer fundraising. We're doing a lot of, we're seeing a lot of virtual fundraising events right now. And so we make it really easy for you to get started with, especially when you're trying to do some individual giving and start up a peer-to-peer campaign perhaps to get that kick-started, or just, you know, having a simple way for donors to give right on your website is really important, especially when you're trying to drive more traffic and attract more people to your organization. And so, yeah, I would just love to chat with you as well. So if you are interested, we can have a sit down, have a 30-minute conversation about your fundraising needs, and I can explore how CauseVox can help. So feel free to take us up on that offer. I'll also be including the link to book that conversation in the follow-up email as well. So yeah, you're gonna get a follow-up email tomorrow with the recording and all of the resources and ways that you can book these consultations and really just make the most of all of the templates as well. So hopefully all of this helps equip you to really bring your individual giving program to the next level. So yeah, thanks so much again, Kelly, for being here and leading the discussion today. So yeah, so I figured we can turn this over to more questions, and in the last 10 minutes or so that we have here. So I know there's already a couple in the queue, so
Okay, great.
but any more questions about how you can overcome some hurdles with individual giving at your organization, just feel free to send those in and we'll get to as many questions as we can. Okay, great. So then an anonymous attendee asks, what are some ideal tasks for interns supporting the development team and building the giving department? How can we empower interns while doing this work?
Okay, so it a little bit depends on the way your organization is set up and what of these options, where in your pipeline you're interested in. Interns I have used in the past. One, interns are great at helping you think of social media components to multi-channel campaigns. I've always really liked having intern input because, especially, you know, kids these days, they're very interested in that kind of thing, and because they're such like digital social media natives, they kind of understand what's gonna take off. It's very intuitively, which is fun. I've also used interns talking about multi-channel campaigns to help in designing collateral if we don't have access to a professional designer with the organizations I've worked with. Because again, some of them just understand what graphics are gonna, you know, grab people. That's not always true. I've had interns turn around and give me something that I'm like, "Wah, okay, no, we're not using that." But quite a few of the interns I've worked with just kind of have this native understanding of how to do social and graphics. The other thing I have done to great success is using interns to do donor thank you calls. I would say you want to be very confident in that intern's ability to maturely handle the conversation and that kind of thing. And often what I will have interns do, you know, pre-pandemic times, I would have them make those calls in the office with me so that I was at least hearing everything they were saying. And that was one of those tasks that I would give to my very mature, very competent interns. So that's something I've used interns for. Especially, I've used them for donor thank you calls and donor solicitation calls a few times. At an organization that had a very robust internship program. Like, our internship program was one of the programs affiliated with the organization, was to give these young people a chance to work in our industry and pick up skills in our industry. I will note it was a paid internship, and that it was when we went from an unpaid internship to a paid internship that we felt comfortable asking interns to make donor solicitation calls. And we had them make solicitations around the internship program because that was something we were looking for funding for. If you have unpaid interns, just be aware of the paradigm that you're not paying somebody to make money for you. So just to make people aware of that. So those are some things I've had interns do. I have also used interns to, again, when we were fundraising for an internship program, having interns write the appeals that we sent out around the internship program to talk about their experience was great. Also, again, mature interns that you can trust with this. I've had interns help with cleaning up our donor database when I can sense that, you know, we sent out an appeal and got 50 returned mailers. Like, can you do some research and see if you can find out where this person is now, or call the cell phone number and get their new address. So some of that data management stuff has been helpful for interns to do. And then the last thing I've used interns for has been in getting major gifts programs off and running. I've used interns to do prospect research, which again could be a whole nother course, but prospect research, just kind of looking into our donors and finding out more about who they are and that kind of thing. So if there were donors that I knew, okay, this person we can upgrade, no problem, but then this person has given to us year after year and I've never met them, and I don't know if they're worth stewarding or if they're just at their max capacity to give. Having an intern look into that person is helpful. And again, a lot of intern aged people right now are digital natives and can like Google it and figure it out so pretty easily themselves. So those are that's a handful of things I've used interns for in fundraising.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I think that's all really helpful. So anonymous attendee also asked, would you request individual updates and ask to past donors, or will an email blast suffice? I think that's a good question.
Can you read that to me again? Sorry.
Oh yeah. So when you're asking basically past donors to give again, would you recommend doing more individual updates and asks, or will an email blast suffice?
Both. It a little depends. What I like to do is I'll do an email blast for our general supporters, but anybody who I'm cultivating towards a major gift or a higher level engagement, monthly giving, sometimes I segment the email blasts. So I will write an email appeal to the general population, but then people on my major giving target list, I'll send a different one that has a monthly giving pitch. That's the ask, and it drives to a different a different donation form that is set on recurring. And then anybody I'm cultivating towards a major gift, I will often exclude from that, but use it, sometimes I will craft the email appeal. If it's got a really great story or a really great update from our organization, I'll strip the asks out of it and send that personally to that donor. And then, follow up with, are you ready to meet with me? And let's talk about how you want to get engaged. So I kind of segment email blasts quite a lot, which is not too hard. I mean, if you've got a base appeal and it's just your messing with the ask portion, it doesn't add a significant amount of work to writing an email appeal. But again, think about your pipeline too and where things are going. For a lot of organizations, I'll do 2 or 3 email blasts and then do a lapsed donor call campaign, where, if people haven't given to these email appeals, it's, December 27th. I will call our lapsed donors who gave $100 or more or something, and just remind them that it's the end of the year. We'd love to have their support, which is more personal. So I believe in multi-channel campaigns, and I think you should be talking to your donors online and offline as much as you can. So it's kind of a really, really broad answer to that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think multi-channel. Yeah.
Multi-channel. Yeah.
Yeah, always the best. And so Rabbi Toby sent in a question. I don't think they're still here, but I do think it's a good question. So what would you do if a major donor gives you half of what they gave the year before? So I guess kind of some of those major donors sort of downgrading, if you will, and what are some suggestions for that?
Yeah. Call them. I've done that before, and it's really helpful. It's good information. It can be hard to hear, and it's scary to call the donor because of course you think it's your fault, right? But I've had a $5,000 donor stop giving because he had twin daughters going to college. That had nothing to do with me. That was his own life circumstances. So I think the best thing to do is call them and have a conversation and be ready to hear hard feedback. But that's how you get better, right? When you have a donor that says like, look, I gave you a lot of money and then I got, form emails all year and I never heard from you. Like, I'm not going to give again. And, it can be hard to hear and it sucks. I'll just put that on the table. It sucks when you get that negative feedback, but that is what you learn from that. And it's also, it's valuable to get negative feedback. It's valuable when you learn that it's a donor's personal circumstances. Because in the example I gave with twin daughters in college, I knew we were not going to get a major gift from him for the years his daughter were in college. But we had a great conversation where he said, but I'm really committed to this organization. The minute I have the money, I will give again. And I think actually it was like 2 years later, he was like, we just kept cultivating him. But we didn't project, like when we were doing our annual projections, we didn't count on his gift, but we just kept cultivating him. And it was actually 2 years later, one of his daughters has gotten a big scholarship and he was ready to give again. And he wasn't on my solicitation list because I had said in 4 years, I'm going to ask him again. But that was the result of really good cultivation and a change in his circumstance. So those things happen all the time. And so just talking to your donor about it, if it's a donor that was worth you recognizing that they gave less, they're a donor that's worth calling to find out why.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keeping in touch, always important.
I love calling donors. I know so many people who hate it, but I love calling donors.
Yeah, always good to see like where are you? What's happening? Why? Why did you give this much this year? What's happening?
Oh, and especially right now, people are just answering the phone at rates I've never seen before.
Really?
And willing to stay on the phone a lot longer. So I guess upside. But yeah, it's really I love talking to donors. I love it.
Yeah, that's great. And so I think we have one more question if anyone else has any questions. I know we're a little over time, but definitely want to get to everyone's questions. So Addie asked, follow up on the intern question. How about for volunteers? So what tasks can you task volunteers with to do around fundraising?
Anything I mentioned for interns, you could do with a very consistent volunteer. Maybe not the social media graphic design stuff if they're older. But volunteers, I talked about that door hanging thing that the Old Greenbelt Theater did, that they did with volunteers. They only had 2 staff members at the time. And I think they had 12 volunteers distribute those 2,000 doorknob doorknob hangers. So that's a great way to leverage them. And I think that's something you could do right now because it's pretty low contact for just hanging things on people's doors if that's something you're interested in. I like working with volunteers to craft email appeals from those volunteers. Volunteers are a great external validator because they give you time, and a lot of volunteers also give you money too. So those are great people to work with to write email appeals about, with an external validator. I'm working on the year-end giving workshop right now that I'm doing with CauseVox, and that's something I'm going to talk about in there is who you send email appeals really matters, and you don't always have to just send them from your executive director. And I love using volunteers to send year-end appeals because they can talk about why they care about your organization and that kind of thing, and they're an external validator. I've also used volunteers. I mean, volunteers are great for peer-to-peer. They're going to be, they're great people to get involved as fundraisers, but they're also great people to get involved in supporting your other participants who are maybe not quite as engaged. So that's a great way to use volunteers in fundraising operations. The main thing I am careful with volunteers is letting them at donor data. That is confidential to your organization. And when I have volunteers who I think can do that stuff well, I make sure that they sign a confidentiality agreement with the organization that they will not share any information that they see about donors. And I also make sure that the access I give them to the database or any worksheets or spreadsheets I pull with donor information is only the information that is critical to the task I need them to do. So for example, I used a volunteer recently with the Old Greenbelt Theater to do some cleaning in our database, but there was a permissions level in their donor database that only allowed them to see the donor's contact information and none of their giving history. And so I would encourage you, if you're using donors for that or to make thank you calls, I use volunteers to make thank you calls all the time, that you make sure that they don't have access to giving numbers for volunteers or for your donors.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip. And I do think that it's great if you're able to utilize some donors to help take some stuff off your plate like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I want to make sure that everything's confidential and all of that.
Yeah, like I only engage volunteers that I really trust in those kinds of operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you said, I think peer-to-peer is actually such a great, like, kind of obvious next step for a lot of fundraisers too. For a lot of volunteers as well, as just to turn them into fundraisers because they're already dedicating time to your organization. And they're probably already advocating for you. Anyway.
Another thing is most volunteers I find are really people. And so when you're just like, hey, can you call these 20 people and see if they'll participate in peer-to-peer? They're like, yeah, I'd love to call people, so. Volunteers tend to be extroverts who want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Kelly, this has been fantastic. As always, it's always a pleasure. So many insights that you have to share and just really breaking down everything into digestible pieces is so valuable, especially when you're just getting started with individual giving. So it's been great to hear from you and your wealth of knowledge through your own experiences. So it's been a great class today. Thanks for everyone hanging in there for our 2-hour intensive. Trying out different styles, seeing how everybody likes it. But I think this is great. So happy to keep in touch. We will be sending out that email, like I said, tomorrow with the recording and the resources. And, of course, those consultations so that you can continue the conversation with Kelly and also myself. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for the great questions.
Everybody.
Great engagement. And we'll be in touch shortly. All right. Take care. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.